Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Welcome to the launch of the Maine Indian Tribal-State Commission's Sea-Run Study Audiobook release, the launch of it. My name is Jill Tompkins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Indian Tribal-State Commission, affectionately known as MITSC, and I am a citizen of the Penobscot Nation. MITSC is an intergovernmental commission comprised of representatives appointed by the Halton Band of Maliseets, the Passamaquoddy Tribe, and the Penobscot Nation, and the state of Maine. It was created out of the Maine Indian Claim Settlement of 1980. One of the commission's responsibilities is to conduct studies of fish and wildlife management policies on non-Indian lands in order to protect tribal fish and wildlife stocks. We're delighted today to be joined by so many distinguished guests, and all of you, including Wabanaki leaders, municipal and state officials, MITSC commissioners, representatives of non-governmental organizations, including the Wabanaki Alliance, and people passionate about enhancing sea-run fish populations and making sustenance fishing once again a reality. We'd like to open this event in a traditional Wabanaki way, and I'm going to invite MITSC Commissioner Bert Fulches, who represents the Penobscot Nation on the commission, to offer a prayer to the Creator, and he has actually asked that you please stay seated for his prayer.
A little bit out of my element in this particular sense, because normally I won't think prayers that I'm going to do. But in this case, because of the fact that I need to make sure that the word that I use is very clear, and also help guide me to help guide you. So, but before I go into the prayer, I want everyone to feel comfortable enough to close your eyes for this, and prepare for it. So before we begin this prayer, I'd like to invite each of you to take 7 slow breaths with me. Each breath will help us remember our connection to all of creation and bring us into balance with circle around us. So if you will, and I know I'm assuming there's people watching this on video, I ask you as well to take part of this. So if you'll close your eyes and trust me, trust creation. With your first breath, turn your thoughts to the east, where the sun rises and new life begins. Breathe in light, a new beginning, the guidance and hope that come with the dawn. With your second breath, turn your thoughts to the south, the place of growth, warmth, and vitality. Breathe in the energy of youth and the fire of life that helps all things grow. With your third breath, turn your thoughts to the west, and a place of reflection and introspection. Breathe in gratitude for the lessons learned and the wisdom that comes as the day begins. With your fourth breath, turn your thoughts to the north, a place of strength and endurance. Breathe in the clarity of the winds and the teachings of those who came before us. With your fifth breath, lift your thoughts upward to Western humanity, to the vastness of the sky and the mystery of creation. Breathe in the light of guidance and vision from above. fish breath. Turn your thoughts downward to our Earth Mother. Breathe in her strength, her love, her nourishment that sustains all living things. And with your seventh breath and final breath, not your final, turn your thoughts inward to the center of your being, where all directions meet. Breathe in balance, peace, and connection to the circle of life that surrounds us and lives within us. Now that we've come together in breath and awareness, let us open our hearts to prayer. Creator, Cheating Western Chimantu, we give thanks for this new day, for the gift of life, for the breath that fills us, and for the waters that continue to flow through this land and within each of us. On this day that honors the first peoples of this land, we lift our hearts in gratitude for our ancestors, for their strength, their teachings, and their prayers that have carried us to this moment. We also give thanks for those who continue to work today, for MITSC, for the writers, the readers, and all who have helped bring forth season, that our stories and truths may continue to find their way into the hearts of others. The words, "See Run," remind us not only of the salmon, but all of our relatives who once filled these waters, the alewives, the sturgeon, the eels, the shag, all beings that sustain life and balance for generations untold. Their return is more than restoration, it is renewal. It is the healing of relationships between land, water, and all who depend on it, including our people. We listen to the words shared here today. May they remind us that everything is connected, that the rivers carry not just fish, but memory, not just water, but the spirit of life itself. May these stories awaken those whose eyes have long looked without truly seeing, those whose hearts have forgotten that the earth is not a resource but a relative. May they remember that when the rivers are healthy, all beings thrive. And when the waters suffer, we all suffer together. Creator, guide our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Let this gathering strengthen our respect for one another and deepen our responsibility to care for these lands and waters as our ancestors once did. We give thanks for those who came before us, for those yet to come, and for this sacred moment we share together.
Really wonderful for starting us in such a good way and centering us here today. We very much appreciate the words that you offered to the Creator on our behalf. I would now like to welcome Lauren Stevens as a Passamaquoddy citizen who is going to share the humble feeling with us.
Lauren Stevens, Beskara Mokadnell, Mujia Madafngo, Rubek Madafngo, Tungasitari. Lauren Stevens and Passamaquoddy from Doppler. It's an honor to be here this morning with you all. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. In my mind and in my heart and my being, it's always a good day to be Indigenous. This song, the Humble Song, speaks about reciprocity between generations, that we learn from each other. We take those gifts that are offered from our elders to our youth, to our four-legged and winged relatives. This is the Humble Song.
Beautiful song with us. It gave me chills. To think of how long has it been since the Wabanaki voices were raised in song. So I invite Chief Francis for the song. To explain the significance of this place and to invite you to this extraordinary.
I thought she was crying because I was next. But thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Bert, for opening us in the right way. And it's great to see everybody this morning. As Jill mentioned, my name's Kirk Francis. I'm chief at Penobscot Indian Nation. I've been proud to serve in that role for, well, way too long now. So I'm really happy to be here. Last time you know, we were on this site for a very significant reason, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But my main job here today is to welcome you to Penobscot territory on behalf of our people, our tribal council. It's an honor to have you here. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day as well. I know there's a lot of faces out here that helped make that possible, so it's good to see a lot of friends and familiar faces. So, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit about the significance of this place. Obviously, this river is extremely significant to the Penobscot people. We're a riverine people. Our territory is within the river. It's a relative. Actually, by law, by tribal law, it's a citizen of our tribe. And we see everything in it as a relative and try to go about how we care for the river from that perspective. It's our cultural identity and at the very core of who we are. So when we talk about things like clean water, bringing our relatives back to their homeland, all of those things, that's not rooted in any kind of power trip or some muscle flexing of sovereignty. It's really about the holistic approach for our future and the fact that our children can grow up to be Penobscot. And without that river and without a healthy river, that's extremely difficult. So, so the last time a lot of us were here, we were here on the Penobscot River Restoration Project, obviously. Penobscot Nation played a significant role in that project. I'd like to, you know, acknowledge our ambassador to that project, Coach Phillips, who passed away recently, would be here today. I've never seen anyone so happy. When we were breaching the dam here, I remember he would consistently say, I can't wait to one day stand on these shores like my ancestors with our spear and be able to harvest the fish. I don't know if he ever saw that happen, but he played a significant role in making sure that will happen someday. Of course, John Banks, I see people here like Laura Roseday and others that really made the tribe a significant voice, allowed us to tell our story, and really helped bring that project to fruition. So really, really honored to be here and really honored to have been part of that project. I had the luxury of becoming chief about the time it was all coming to fruition. And so I got to stand at a lot of podiums and do a lot of sign-ins and do a lot of those things that were extremely exciting. But, you know, I want to acknowledge all the work that was done before me, by previous leaders, Chief Dana, Chief Sapir, a whole host of people that were really driven in one direction by this project. So with this C-Run audiobook release today, I think it's important that we take an opportunity to really acknowledge the comprehensive approach to this report and also thank the authors and get rededicated to really fulfilling the goals and objectives of what we want to accomplish with this river and bringing back our relatives to their homeland. And so I just hope you'll all join me, the nation, MITSC, and a whole host of other folks in doing that and making sure that we understand our work's not done and the Penobscot Nation stands committed to doing whatever it takes in partnership. And I think that's one of the great things of projects like this. The Restoration Project is really not just a model for river restoration throughout the country. We're seeing things now happen on the Kennebec. We're seeing things happen all across the country that look to the Penobscot Project as an example, but how it brought people together and the relationships that were created, the friendships, and I think that's been the real value of all of this. So thank you all for being here in our territory. It's great to see you all, and I look forward to our continued work together. Thank you.
Carpal tunnel surgery earlier this week. Thank you so much, Chief Francis, for your words, which impress upon us the importance of this site on the river and the hope for fisheries restoration that was started here. And speaking of beginnings and starts, I'd like to invite Commissioner Sam St. John, who represents the Holton Band of Maliseets, to come forward and share with us the genesis of the Sea Run study.
I'm a little bit under the weather, so sorry if this speech sounds a little more sensual than it should. On January 24, 2019, Edward Bassett, a Passamaquoddy tribal elder and longtime employee of the tribe environmental department, asked to speak to the commission. For several years, Ed's work had focused on restoring the St. Croix watershed, which lies at the heart of the Passamaquoddy homeland. In 2015, his testimony opposing a bill that would have prevented alewives from passing through Grand Falls Dam and St. Croix River, Ed explained his motivation to restore fish runs. He said these fish have helped countless generations of Native Americans, as well as non-natives, survive. Now it is our time to repay that debt and help them survive. Ed's presentation to the Commission in 2019 concerned the historic and ongoing degradation of waters upon which tribal members depend for the exercise of sustenance fishing. He spoke movingly about the empty food shelves of his fellow tribal members. The Commission was deeply moved by Ed's words and quickly passed a resolution directing the then Executive Director Paul Tebow to assess the impact of MITSC rulemaking and studies, or lack thereof, on the health of fish stocks and water quality. Paul said, what became of Sea Run was really in many ways the Ed project. Unfortunately, Ed couldn't be here today. Paul was acquainted with fellow attorney Judd S.D. Kendall, and MITSC contracted with Judd to review historical documents. Ed then introduced Paul to Tony Sutton, a Passamaquoddy tribal citizen and professor at the University of Minnesota. Tony teaches in the field of ecology and environmental science with a focus on food sovereignty for the Wabanaki communities. Judd and Tony became co-authors of the report. Tony had interviewed many Wabanaki tribal citizens about their memories of fisheries and their thoughts on current conditions. Quotations from these individuals are included throughout the study, including myself. In 2022, the beautifully illustrated Sea Run report was published. Nowadays, people are busier than ever and have little time to read a 133-page study. Audiobooks and podcasts are growing in popularity. MITSC wanted to spread the Sea Run story better. It's still a pretty good read if you ever get your hands on it. What better way to do that than through the voices of the people who have been affected most profoundly by the decline and near eradication of the Sea Run fisheries. Thus, the idea was born to create an audio version of Sea Run narrated by Wabanakis. Several snowstorms and 15 months later, the audiobook that we celebrate today was completed.
Thank you, Commissioner St. John. We want to give a huge thank you to all of you for joining us today, and we're especially grateful to our grant sponsors, the Alina B. Sewell Foundation and the Maine Initiative's Grants for Change program for sponsoring the audiobook production, and we're indebted to the Salmon Veazie Club for generously sharing this beautiful location with us. The narration and recording of the audiobook took many hours, and we could never fully express our appreciation to our narrators. So I'd ask them to rise as I say their name. Holton Band and Maliseet Indians citizen Sue Desiderio, Passamaquoddy tribal citizen Dr. Dwayne Toner, Penobscot tribal citizens Don Neptune Adams and Dale Lowell, and Mi'kmaq tribal citizen Ken Craig. Not a single one of you hesitated. Not a single one of you hesitated to join the project when we asked you, so thank you so much. You didn't get rich doing it, but just think, with this audiobook, you'll become immortal. This audiobook would not have been possible without the patience, skill, and tenacity of post-hypnotic press producers, Carolyn and Carol Craig. They have our deepest gratitude. And finally, I'd like to thank the MITSC team of Rachel Bell, Rocky Hopkins, and Teresa Singh. Rise, please. Well done.
All right.
And special appreciation goes to John Diefenbacher Paul, the former executive director for MITSC and for the Wabanaki Alliance, for coming out of retirement to facilitate today's event and for doing the extensive media outreach that he's so well known for. Thank you. I'm Unfortunately, Tony Sutton, one of the co-authors of Sea Run, had a prior commitment, so he couldn't be here. But he deeply regrets the fact that there was that conflict. But it is now my honor and deep pleasure to introduce Judd S.D. Kendall, the other co-author of Sea Run. Judd is a graduate of the University of Maine School of Law. He retired after practicing law for over 48 years with Pine Tree Legal Assistance, where he managed the Native American unit. In addition to Sea Run, Judd has done important legal research projects for MITSC, including the research report that supported the restoration of Article 10, Section 5, which concerned the state of Maine's treaty obligations to the Wabanaki tribes to the printed version of the Maine Constitution. You can see Judd in MITSC's tributary videos on Sea Run on the MITSC website, including a speech that he gave at the Common Ground Fair last year, and he and Tony again presented this year. I recently learned that Judd is also a songwriter and singer. After 50 years of singing, he finally decided to record his unwritten songs. And you can enjoy his performance on YouTube on a page called Southpaw Slim Songs, The Hitchhiking Years. Appearing at the Crumpet in Brunswick on Sunday, October 26th. So I'd like to now welcome Judd to share with you.
Jill. You know, if we were all the same height, these things would be a lot easier. And I'm listed as one of the co-authors of Sea Run, but it really was a group project. Many hands, many minds went into the creation, starting with Ed Bassett, who also provided commentary and reviewed the drafts as we completed them. I don't have time to tell you the whole story of Sea Run, and I can't speak for anybody else, but what I'm going to tell you about is my story of writing the story, what I learned in doing so. I was given the project to review the impact of the state of Maine's fisheries policy on the quality and quantity of traditional tribal fish stocks and Wabanaki sustenance lifeways practice. Okay? Now, I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for a long time. I know how to research, read, and interpret policy, so the project sounded a little dry, if you'll excuse the pun, but doable. So, as the project progressed, I didn't just read and interpret policy. What I found is that I learned a whole new way of looking at Maine's history through the eyes of the fish and the Wabanaki people. Woo. It is a story that needs to be told and needs to be learned. The first problem with the study, of course, was establishing the baseline. If you're going to measure the impact of something on something else, you got to know where you start from. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So as I did the research, that led me back farther and farther through history to the pre-colonial times when the quantities of sea run fish in our rivers, not just the salmon, but, and excuse me, I'm going to make a prop appear right here. I would have had this opened already, except that it's a little chilly today. The alewives. The fish that feeds all. Okay, so the vast quantities of fish that came up our rivers, that migrated here, the alewives, shad, sturgeon, stripers, came in numbers that the early white settlers described as unbelievable, unheard of. 30 to 80 million alewives going up the St. Croix, the Scudic River. Shad by the millions. The commercial catch for salmon in the Penobscot in the early 1800s was 100,000. That's the salmon that were caught, not the salmon that went up the river. Now, just so, for anyone who doesn't know, Maine has plenty of landlocked fish and the ocean has plenty of fish, but the sea run fish are the fish that live, most of them live in the ocean most of their lives, and they come back up to fresh water to spawn in this vast migration. except the eels, of course, that go the other way. In doing this research, I read a lot of fairly dry stuff. I read a lot of old reports from the Fisheries Commission to the legislature. And as I was going back in time, I came across a quote that really struck me. This is from the Maine's Commissioners of Fisheries in 1875, 150 years ago. Okay? People are now beginning to realize the mighty wrong that was perpetrated when our rivers were obstructed by special privileges granted to individuals and corporations, and the rights of the people sacrificed. There was no excuse for exterminating a greater amount of food value that cost the state not 1 cent in its production than all the lumber of Maine was worth. The fish of the Penobscot or the Kennebec is worth more than the lumber on either of those rivers. So what happened to the fish? First, the Wabanaki people were removed from many of the most important fishing sites and crossing points. In the late 1600s, after settlement of the District of Maine began, with the resulting tension and conflict with the Wabanaki people, Governor Andros of Massachusetts decreed that 11 forts would be built in Maine. Less than half of the forts were built to protect settler populations. Most of the forts were built at crossing places and fishing places to disrupt the Wabanaki economy and mobility. They were offensive forts, not defensive forts. Then dams were built, often at the same fishing and crossing places from which the Wabanaki had been displaced. First sawmills, then dams to power other industries, to control water flow for the lumber industry and its log drive. The dams were intended to keep the water in, not the fish out, but the effect was the same. By the mid-1800s, more than 95% of alewife spawning grounds were inaccessible to the fish. And by the early 20th century, huge impassable dams spanned the main stems of our largest rivers. And with the industry came pollution. The wastes from production generally went directly into the rivers, as did the waste from growing population centers, and the surviving sea-run fish became tainted with poison and unhealthy to eat. Through dams and pollution and overfishing, by the middle of the last century, the sea-run fish stocks were at less than 1% of what they had once been. But the history of the fish and the history of Maine is seen through the lens of the fish was not all I learned from sea-run. I learned about the Wabanaki languages. I learned about culture and the relationships between the fish and the birds and the animals and the plants, the rivers themselves, and the people who lived here and still live here. All are connected, all are relations. To the Wabanaki people, these fish were both food and family. But by 1980, when the land claims case settled and the inherent right of the Wabanaki people to fish for their sustenance was finally recognized in law, the quantities of sea-run fish were small, and those remaining were harmful to health if eaten in any quantity. I was particularly struck by what one of the tribal members interviewed for sea-run said. And Tony Sutton did these interviews, and anyway, one of them said, "For me, it's our people's way of life for thousands of years. But we depended on fish to survive, and they're in trouble now, and they're dependent on us to help them turn things around." Sea-Run describes recent efforts to help restore the fish. Although restoration has been the expressed policy of the state of Maine since the 1860s, that policy was not carried out. It took alliances and collaborations, often Wabanaki-led, from opening the Scudic River to the Alewives, removing the huge dams on the main stems, 2 dams on the Penobscot, and now, as we hear, some on the Kennebec will be removed. But it's not just the main dams, it's also redoing the culverts and the road crossings. Everything on our smallest streams and brooks where the alewives would go to spawn, to carry the nutrients from the sea throughout this whole network of waters. And the alewives brought the larvae of the freshwater mussels that are filter feeders, and they would then clean the waters. All of this was gone. To the Maliseets, reforming the bed of the McDuxbury River that had been straightened and smoothed for the log drives. There are no sea-run fish getting up to the McDuxbury now because there's still a huge dam on the St. John, the beautiful river. But when the fish finally come back, the riverbed will be ready for them. Finally, Sea-Run makes some recommendations as to what steps we can take to restore the fish and Wabanaki lifeways. We should talk about what sustenance really means. For better communications amongst state agencies and further study, and work to restore Wabanaki lifeways and use traditional ecological knowledge when making decisions about our waterways. I live on Pushaw Lake, been there since 1976. And I learned in the research that Pushaw Lake was a major spawning ground for alewives. There were no alewives in Pushaw Lake. But with the removal of the dams on the Penobscot and the placement of a fishway on the dam that is at the outlet from Pushaw Lake, the alewives came back. I knew this intellectually, but I didn't know really what to look for. This summer, my grandkids were up staying on the lake as they do every summer for a little while. And my 7-year-old grandchild, Makai, became fascinated with feeding the fish. So rather than, give her pieces of bread which aren't good for the fish, we actually got a can of fish food from the fish store, pet shop. And every morning we'd go out, she and I, on the pier, on the dock. And in the morning, it's still, it's clear. You can see into the water just as well as you can into the air. And she got the food in. Pretty soon there were, 30 to 40 little fish, 3 or 4 inches long. They would show up, and they'd be there every morning. We'd come out of the dock, they'd already be there. Ready, they knew what was going on. So I thought that was great. One morning, looking in that clear water, I saw something else. A huge school of little fish, not interested in our food, not interested in us, just passing through like a highway, like a river, alewives, hundreds, thousands of them, passing right through like that. It's happening. It'll take a long time, but it's happening. Thank you.
I fish all the time now in nearby waterways. So I fish at night all the time and in the water with light, and I see schools of big schools of fish.
We're blessed to have Judd
I see.
come and work with MITSC and Tony. I mean, as we can all see, not only is he a talented writer, but he's really committing to it, passionate to it. He's been an ally of ours for a long time, and we're not letting him go yet. got more work for him to do, as we'll talk about in just a little bit. But first, the reason you're all here, we'd like to share a little bit of the audiobook with you. We're going to share a little piece, which I believe our narrators are Don Neptune Adams, followed by Dwayne Toma.
Three, contributing factors. What factors caused the changes in the fisheries over time? What are the current barriers to reaching the goals set out above? And what are areas of common ground? Dams, log drives, pollution, and overfishing combined to bring Atlantic salmon to the brink of extinction. Recently, poor survival in the ocean has made the problem worse. This succinct statement from Maine's DMR lists the major factors that caused the collapse of Maine's sea-run fisheries, including tribal fisheries, and that have frustrated attempts at restoration. The focus of this report is to examine the extent to which state policy contributed to that collapse. Since many of the state policies that affected the fisheries and sustenance practices most profoundly were not specifically directed at fish and wildlife management, this report is not limited to those policies alone. As noted above, macroeconomic policy in Maine often conflicted with fish restoration, and when it did, economic policy generally trumped policies impacting the fisheries.
They didn't always agreed upon. Second Penobscot Nation citizen. This relationship is here. The relationship that we have with these fisheries are here because of how well we were in balance with it. And now, because the reason everybody else can catch these fish and do whatever because of that 10,000 year of history that we had of keeping everything in balance.
So we had some talented and diverse narrators, as you can see. Don's voice is so soothing, but then Dwayne comes in and really wakes you up. Judd mentioned the recommendations that are in the study, so I would recommend that you look at them. And when I started with MITSC in October of 2023, I thought this is a fabulous report. With all these recommendations, what are you doing about it? And so we sat and we said, well, maybe we could get some money and implement some of them. So we were very fortunate that the Common Council Foundation, Native Voices Rising, awarded us a grant to start a project we're calling Wabanaki Food Sovereignty through Sustenance Fishing Restoration, which in part is to advance recommendation number 1. So this project focuses on highlighting the tension between the Wabanaki cultural understandings of sustenance and the narrow Maine statutory definition, which contributes to Wabanaki people's food insecurity and cultural harms. MITSC's next action steps, which we hope you will all support as well, is first to educate Maine citizens, starting in elementary school, about the colonial and state policies separated Wabanakis from their fishing rights. And this can be achieved by securing the full implementation of the 2001 Wabanaki Studies Bill. Second, conducting formal research into the historical Wabanaki understandings of sustenance as communal in nature. And Judd, who's already started this work, will be going further in depth on that. Third, redefining sustenance. We're developing a different word or phrase or a definitional concept that better aligns with historical and traditional Wabanaki understandings. MITSC is very fortunate to have help on this from Australian lawyer Teresa Singh, who came to work for MITSC as a legal fellow. Teresa holds a Juris Doctorate with distinction from the University of South Wales and a master's in law from Columbia Law School. We are greatly benefiting from her insight gained from her prior experience with Wabanaki concerns, with Aboriginal concerns. So very fortunate, and she's not really costing us very much money.
Thank Columbia.
So, yes, thank you. And finally, our last step in this project will be to identify and replicate promising tribal municipal collaborations for river restoration and fisheries co-management. MITSC certainly has its work cut out for it. Without further ado, we are going to open it up for questions. I can ask Joe to come up. There's heat and coffee inside.
Any questions? Hearing none, let's go inside. Just want to make sure, if there are any questions, I can try to answer them.
And Judd will certainly be around, so if you have questions, we can ask them in a public setting. So we do hope that you leave here today inspired to join MITSC in spreading the story of Sea Run and implementing its recommendations. Look for the link to the free audiobook at mitsc.org. The QR code is on your program. Thank you very much for attending today, and we very much would welcome you to join us in the clubhouse for refreshments and conversation. Thank you again for coming.